We recap the first weekend of NBA free agency. Miles Bridges signs a deal, just not the one we thought. And LaMelo Ball agrees to a rookie max extension. We'll discuss it all today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen.
What's
We're
wrong?
free. We're available anywhere you get your podcasts. And that includes YouTube, where if you're watching YouTube, you can see Doug Branson in a hotel room just being about as cool as you possibly can be. I mean, I love the headset because it makes it look like you're a little Top Gunny, especially with the USA hat. But for those that are listening, Doug is wearing his sunglasses indoors as we record, 8:23 a.m. Doug, explain yourself.
Well, the Hornets are all out of missiles. They're switching to guns. And I am smothered in U.S. soccer. Came down to Charlotte to watch the men's national team. Saw Jesus back-to-back Hattie. There's your soccer analysis for the day. But, yeah, you don't want to see these eyeballs. Okay, these eyeballs, these retinas have seen some things, if you will. And, yeah, I'm recovering, and I'm doing my best here, and you know, the sunglasses are helping. So there you go.
Okay, that is Doug Branson. Find his work on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3. By the way, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com. Promo code Locked On. I don't know if your eyes are hurting from Hornets free agency. I know that we lost DSJ. RIP to DSJ's time with the Hornets. We'll get to him in just a moment. We can talk about the good news with LaMelo. That was something good that the Hornets did. Just lock him up. LaMelo agreed. No worries. As soon as he's eligible to sign, bang, it happened. We'll get to that in a moment. But we do have to get to Miles Bridges. Signed a deal, Doug. Not the one that we all thought, though. Woj reported yesterday about, 2:30, something like that, maybe 3. Charlotte Hornets restricted free agent Miles Bridges is preparing to sign the $7.9 million qualifying offer for this upcoming season, clearing the way for him to become an unrestricted free agent next summer. The Hornets and Bridges are far apart in extension talks. And so this was always the hard part, Doug, trying to figure out what the value of Miles is going to be next year. I know Miles and his agency, Clutch, reached out to the Hornets to see if they would just rescind the offer, making him an unrestricted free agent as soon as this offseason. To which the Hornets replied, no. You mean just give up all the leverage? No, that's dumb.
No.
We're not going to do that.
Right.
So they decided to keep the qualifying offer. Miles Bridges couldn't find any more value anywhere. If he was able to find a bigger contract, then he would have signed it. And I'm surprised here. I didn't think that there was going to be one thing 100% happening over another. I was prepared to be surprised, Doug. I did not see him signing the qualifying offer. I was prepared to be surprised on like a $15 million contract or a 10 or maybe 25. I thought the range was going to be all over the place. I didn't expect him to sign the qualifying offer.
No, I didn't expect him to either, mainly because I think I probably overestimated the Charlotte Hornets' willingness to overpay or to bring back Miles Bridges, to feel desperate enough to bring back Miles Bridges, because even though they said very little, I think they've done a good job of telegraphing from the very beginning, even before the domestic violence charges, they've telegraphed their desire to bring back Miles Bridges. But they obviously, after everything that's happened, they had a limit. And look, if the team is going to sell their soul to bring back Miles Bridges, I would at least like them to get good value on that soul. And it seems like they had a hard line on where they were willing to go with the contract. And it could be because you're committing multiple years. And we don't know if Miles Bridges got no offers on the free market, but he may have gotten an offer that was multi-year, but not anywhere near the dollar value, because I think a lot of teams around the league are going to have questions both off the court and on the court. I've been trying to toot this horn as much as I can, but I think there are significant questions about Miles Bridges because he's missed an entire year of basketball. I don't know that there are a ton of stories out there of guys that do that, especially when it's not around an injury that you're rehabbing and come back to like have stellar careers. So I think Miles Bridges would be an exception to the rule in that case. And so, it's obvious they wanted that Clutch and Rich Paul wanted a deal that reflected where Miles Bridges was before all of this happened. They were sticking their head in the sand a little bit. But the domestic violence charges did happen. He did miss an entire year of basketball. And I think the Hornets did the smart thing by saying, whoa, especially when you consider that he's negotiating with folks in Mitch Kupchak and Michael Jordan that are not even going to most likely be the main decision makers moving forward. They are now playing with OPM, other people's money, and I think they ultimately did the smart thing here.
Well, and maybe we could have seen this once we got the report from Jake Fisher about Miles Bridges and Clutch reaching out to the Hornets to rescind the qualifying offer.
That was the first moment you went, okay, this is not going to go smoothly for these two parties.
100%. Well, and especially one, right? Especially with Miles. Now, you could look at this, and I was looking at what my timeline decided was the most advantageous situation for one party or the other, like who had the most leverage. It was interesting to figure out what people thought of with the whole leverage thing. The Hornets had it this year, only signing him to the qualifying offer. If you want him long term, then Miles comes in, let's say that he does perform well and then signs a contract, in unrestricted free agency. Now you have the inside track still. You have bird rights. You can have some raises, but you don't have full control over that anymore. He could agree to sign with another team now. So maybe that's something that you don't want if you're the Hornets, but also in the short term, yeah, it's an $8 million a year deal, or just for the one season that he's going to be playing under this current contract structure. And Miles doesn't get the money right away. And look, at the end of these off seasons, during these contract years, if you don't get a long-term bag secured up, then you risk injury. You risk the fact that Miles isn't as good as he was in his $30 million a year potential campaign because he's missed an entire season. He's going to miss the first 10 games. It is a small amount, but it's also not nothing that he's missing 10 games. So all of that factors into a point where, this thing could go awry for Miles just as far as the financial situation goes.
Well, in terms of this season, it's a big deal, right? Because you're not only trying to figure out a way to work him into the rotation. Do you start him? Where do you put him within the context of this team? But now you have to wait 10 games before you can even play him. So I think it's a big deal. But also, I think that within the context of the Hornets were going to do most everything they could to bring him back, this was probably the best case scenario. Because for me personally, for a lot of reasons that you and I have discussed over and over on this show, I think for me personally, the best case scenario would have been for the Charlotte Hornets to move on completely from Miles Bridges, because I can't get past the pictures that I've seen, the video that I've seen. And, I don't believe that that's something that the Hornets should really associate their program with, okay? But this is the best case scenario within that context of they were going to do everything to bring him back because it is low risk, because even if he does perform well and he comes out and does all of the things that we expect him to do and the team to do to rehab his image, if he does all of that and completely stays out of trouble for an entire year, he'll most likely be negotiating with a different group of people. So I don't think that there will be necessarily hard feelings. And as you said, they will have not total advantage, not total control like they have over this process, but they will have some advantages over other teams when he does get to unrestricted free agency. So I don't think that it's necessarily like, oh, well, he's definitely gone in unrestricted free agency, because he also has a great relationship with LaMelo Ball. If those two play well together and they make the playoffs and who knows, playoff series win, there's so many things that can happen in the next 12 months that can move this process one way or the other. I just don't think we can assume things at this point. But what the Charlotte Hornets did by sticking to their guns and essentially forcing him into the qualifying offer was they kept all of those options open, because once you sign into the long-term deal, those options all go away. And now, if it does go wrong, you're stuck with that. And the Hornets, the next iteration of the Hornets front office and management, they're no longer stuck with those options.
Yeah, let's finish some of that conversation. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast, I want to talk a little more about new ownership, that angle going into Miles Bridges' contract season. Once again, this prove it year, and then we can get to LaMelo Ball's extension in just a moment. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's a fantasy sports website or fantasy sports app where you can pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available, and they offer projections on really any sport you watch. Just download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com. Sign up and play daily fantasy sports today. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, they give you $100. If you deposit $50, they give you $50. You get the idea. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. More Locked On Hornets coming up next. Doug, what's interesting about you wearing sunglasses inside is whatever take you deliver, it makes you look more like a douchebag. So you have to be really careful on everything you say, because if there is something that just so happens to be aggregated or criticized or is circulating on social media, you're going to look like that, delivering whatever take. And it's going to be the total Le Batard bit where they're dressed up.
Sorry. That was a little, I'm sorry. That was a little Honduras versus Haiti. That was a little Honduras versus Haiti coming back. I'm sorry. I apologize in advance. It's been rough. I'm telling you, the Hondurans, they came in full force to Bank of America Stadium. I stayed for the first half of that game. I had to go. But it was incredible. Listen. No one celebrates like the Hondurans. I mean, when they scored the goal in the first half, that place was electric. It's crazy.
You sound like the play-by-play announcer for Coffee Town, except a little bit more douchier. That's what you sound like.
Well, listen, I'm a full-on soccer fan now. I got this great scarf from AO, the American Outlaws in Charlotte. It says Hornets Nest of Rebellion. Which I just had gravitated towards immediately. So give me that cool scarf. So now wearing a scarf in 94-degree heat, that was probably ill-advised. Now the back of my neck is not sunburnt, but I did probably suffer heat stroke at some point. But I'm here now.
It was so hot yesterday. It was so very hot. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the new ownership angle here, because this does allow flexibility, not for Michael Jordan and Mitch Kupchak, maybe Mitch Kupchak, but we know for sure not Michael Jordan, who is going to go through this last offseason as lead governor. And then that exchanges hands to Gabe Plotkin and Rick Schnall, to where, Doug, now they'll decide what happens with Miles. Now,
real quick, maybe they already have. Let me just throw this at you. Maybe they already have had some influence in this decision.
Yep, 100%. So because we have talked about their opinions mattering, Mitch Kupchak has addressed how their opinions did matter, at least in the NBA draft. And then Bobby Marks said that free agency was going to be a lot harder because you're going to be doing the whole OPM thing, to use the phrase that you're going with, except it's Michael using Gabe Plotkin's money, right? It's Michael using Rick Schnall's money in this case. And so now you're having to decide for them, but then their opinions are mattering. And so, that goes into Miles Bridges only agreeing to the qualifying offer, and partly because Miles didn't have a deal enough to his liking out there in restricted free agency. And so you just wonder how much that had influence over what Michael and Mitch decided to do with Miles, and vice versa with Grant and PJ Washington and other stuff that haven't even been decided yet. Grant Williams, that is.
Yeah, and look, for Miles, it's a big risk. But I don't, because I think some people will critique Miles in this respect, that him and his team are being delusional because there weren't those big offers coming down, that they were delusional to think that the Hornets would, commit a ton of money long term to Miles Bridges after everything that's happened. But I say, look, if he wants to completely bet on himself in this scenario, then he has every right to do that. And now he is on that sort of ultimate prove it deal. And if he comes in and he plays well and the Hornets have success, and then he enters unrestricted free agency, having watched how professional sports franchises, especially in the NBA, Yeah, after one serves their punishment, however absurd that punishment is relative to the offense, whenever that happens and a player finds success, NBA franchises are more than willing to forget about it. Because I think a lot of people are going to look at this situation and go, yeah, man, a lot of teams didn't give him an offer because of all that off-the-court stuff. And I think it's the year off. I really do. I think it's the uncertainty of paying a player a lot of money, and you don't know. Everyone knew what Miles was before all of this happened. That's why he was about to get $100 million. Now teams are less sure about what that player is, and that's why they're not willing to commit long-term money.
Right. And so, yeah, we'll eventually see what happens after this season. We'll talk plenty more about Miles. There's more to get to there. But we need to address LaMelo Ball. The Hornets, they got the deal done. LaMelo decided, you know what? I'm just going to sign this immediately. The free agent, the max extension, Charlotte Hornets, LaMelo All-Star has agreed in principle on a 5-year designated rookie max extension that could be worth as much as $260 million. $260 million. That is what he could end up making if he makes an all-NBA team. So if he makes that, then he could get the full amount of that extension, it being $260 million. Now it's more likely going to be like 207, 205. You see anywhere from 203 to 207, whatever. It's going to be around that range of just above $200 million. Doug, first day that he's eligible to sign it, he does. And so despite all the outside noise that LaMelo could be the first rookie to turn down this type of money and go to a different team because he hates it in Charlotte so much that he's always wanted to go to a different franchise and he wants to go back home to L.A. Despite all, it doesn't matter about the money. The Hornets are a poverty franchise. It'll never agree to go back to Charlotte. It's never happening. Except it happened as soon as he possibly could put ink to paper. And now, at least contractually, he is linked to Charlotte. And it's always been understood. If he wanted to leave the franchise, then this is the way you do it. You sign the extension, and then you demand a trade if it leads you to do so, if the situation around you leads you to do so. That's still in play. But everyone that decided, oh, dude, this is easy, LaMelo is going to leave this team, it was all outside noise. We've been saying it this entire time. It was never coming from inside the house. The call was never coming from LaMelo. It was always outside noise. And it was proven with him signing this deal.
Absolutely. No surprise here. LaMelo signing the deal. I assumed it was going to happen on day one, although I will admit I was a little scared because the Hornets haven't, they really haven't made a peep in free agency so far. Mm-hmm. And so even this deal, I was like, look, I'm not going to assume anything at this point. Not doing anything so far in free agency other than the qualifying offer for Miles Bridges, that's been difficult to take. But had they not been able to get a deal done pretty immediately for LaMelo Ball, would have been a nightmare. Would have signaled, I think, some really troubling things within the franchise as they look to transition to new ownership. It would have been, I think, pretty devastating for me if they couldn't get it done immediately, because so much of the incentive for LaMelo Ball was to sign this contract, and he has expressed a desire to be in Charlotte and to win in Charlotte, and so I think they got the deal done. That's good. They didn't mess around. I haven't heard anything about any stipulations. You and I had speculated. Do they put in some injured game stuff? Like they did for Zion Williamson. I think if the franchise was smart, they probably didn't do that. You just don't mess around at this point. The injury issues are there, but they're not so severe, and it doesn't come along with, I think, some of the same questions that Zion Williamson had in terms of like fitness. You're a little worried about like, okay, are the injuries connected to his commitment, right? That's not LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball is totally committed. He's had some freak injuries, and they are obviously confident that he's 100% healthy or working towards that, and will be in the future. And so, yeah, I think as a Hornets fan, you should be super excited. You have a talent here in LaMelo Ball that does have every piece in place to become an all-NBA player in this league. And now he has the biggest contract on the team, and you should see this franchise finally pivot towards making LaMelo Ball the number one focus of this team, the number one selling point. And, now it's on LaMelo Ball too, whether it's this year or next year, to now, okay, the keys have been given to you because that's what this contract signals. You're the highest paid player on the team. And now I think you have to take that leadership mantle now and run with it and say, all right, this is my team. I'm going to speak for this team. I'm going to be the voice of this team on and off the court. And I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how soon that happens as well, because now there's some kind of underlying instance of being the big dog where LaMelo's always been the best player.
Right.
And especially since he had this all-star nod, but also now that you are the highest paid player, it's no longer going to be Gordon Hayward. And once that takes effect, yes, you can get some helpful leading type free agents. I know Mitch Kupchak has talked about still wanting to address that. You still have to bring back PJ, Grant Williams. So what Grant Williams could be coming back to the Hornets. I know that's one of the hot rumors out there right now revolving this organization, but we'll see. You have LaMelo Ball locked up, at least for the time being, and he could really take on that leadership role.
But it's not a given. He doesn't have, as we've seen with Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward was the highest paid player on this team and felt no obligation to come into this locker room and be a leader. He's a lunch pail guy. I'm going to come in and do my work and then leave. And that's not what the Hornets need. They don't need another lunch pail guy. They do need a player that can come in and command a locker room. And maybe that doesn't happen immediately. Maybe he does need some more accolades to back up the money. I don't think it would be fair to immediately expect that from him game one of the regular season or whatever. But I think we're building towards that is what I'm saying. And this was an important part of that. Now he has some of the cash, the cachet and the cash to be the leader in the locker room, and we'll see if he can fit that, because some guys don't fit the suit. We'll see if he fits the suit.
Football coaches all across America are throwing up at the fact that you said we don't need another lunch pail guy. No, nobody agrees with that. No football coach agrees with that statement. All right, we have one more segment to go. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
I look like a football coach right now.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
After dissecting the Miles decision, celebrating LaMelo's rookie max extension, we move on to lamenting one decision made by the Hornets, not bringing back Dennis Smith Jr. We'll get to that next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. How are you doing, Doug? You okay?
I don't know if it's the hangover, or I don't know if it's you mentioning that the Hornets decided. I want to make sure we get that word out there. They decided not to bring back Dennis Smith Jr. because he goes to Brooklyn on this $2.5 million one-year deal, a deal that the Hornets could have easily made. They decided that after everything that DSJ gave them, they found this guy on the rubble heap. I mean, he was almost out of the league. And the Hornets give him a chance, and what does he do? He takes that chance, and he becomes the defensive heart and soul of this basketball team in a year where they needed plenty of heart and soul to survive it. And Brooklyn comes along, and they're going to be the beneficiaries of all of that because they made Dennis Smith Jr. a priority, and the Hornets didn't. So now I have a massive headache, and I can't tell if it's the Miller Lite or DSJ.
Yeah,
probably
this
the Miller
one stings. Yeah, probably. Probably the Miller Lite. Yeah, drink some coffee, buddy. Yeah, make sure that wakes you up. Yeah, $2.5 million. That low of a number is what particularly stings, because if you look at what the fans were projecting he would make, or what that pundits maybe were projecting he'd make, it was more than 2.5. I mean, it was anywhere from. I mean, I saw some people expect him to make a damn full mid-level exception.
Well,
now, I never thought it was going to be. I never thought it was going to be that. Ever. I did think it was going to be half of it. I thought it'd be 6. I thought it'd get up there. And if it was going to be that, then I thought that might be a tiny bit dicey for the Hornets, but you still bring them back. I thought they would. $2.5 million. It's a really short deal. And you also have flexibility, even if you did want to go through another prove-it deal with DSJ. All right, you did it once. Now let's see if you can improve your offense and do it again. Because, Doug, it's such a low figure. I know you're trying to keep as much flexibility this season as possible, especially if you want to go after Miles, PJ, and Grant Williams. And with Miles agreeing to this qualifying offer, that's what makes it possible with all of the Grant conversation out there. So if that's the case, maybe you feel like you need to save every single penny. But Dennis Smith Jr. helped at least give you enough paint touches. He was a good facilitator. No, he could not shoot. And offensively, there were some real struggles. But the fact that he was so good at the point of attack defensively last year, he was amazing at it. To let him walk for $2.5 million for some backcourt depth, especially for a guy like LaMelo, who has been injured now this last season. He got injured a few separate times. Yeah, that one hurts. And he was such a great guy to have around the locker room anyway. I don't want to undervalue that. Like being at the Spectrum Center, this dude would come in from practice and say what's up to everybody, made sure everyone was accounted for, dap you up, talk to you, good morning. I just feel like those guys are pretty valuable, especially at $2.5 million.
Yeah, we're still waiting for the Hornets to go out and find veteran leadership, and they had some. They still needed more, but they had some in Dennis Smith Jr. who did have an aggressiveness, a mentality when he said he put Dallas's bleep in the dirt after beating Dallas and knocking them out of the playoffs at the end of the season. Like that's the kind of mentality that this Hornets team should want, should desire, and shouldn't overpay for necessarily, and they wouldn't have had to with Dennis Smith Jr., who I think is somebody that has seen the end of his career, was probably willing to take the the 1 year smaller money deal for a franchise that came in and sold him on a roll and made him a priority. I mean, that's the thing that I take from the Shams tweet the most, is like Brooklyn came in immediately and said, hey, we want you as part of our plan. And Brooklyn is a playoff team. I mean, they're going to make a run at this thing. So there's some desire there, too, to play on a winner. And, the Hornets could have done that. They could have sold him immediately, worked on that deal as soon as possible. And I think this signals, Walker, that for a second offseason in a row, Miles Bridges has frozen this team in free agency. It has prevented them from making some moves around the margins or major moves or whatever. Having to work this deal out with Miles has prevented them from making other moves. As other teams, stock up and get ready to make a run to the play-in or playoffs, the Hornets are, still working on a PJ deal, possibly a Grant deal. But all of this is, I think, pretty disheartening that they couldn't see the value that Dennis Smith Jr. brings. And also what's disheartening, Walker, is that it seems like the Hornets are prioritizing bringing back free agents that really nobody else wants. Or if they do want them, they're on, pretty low market value. That's kind of disheartening. It's kind of nice to go out there and compete with other teams that want your assets. Nobody wants them. Like, I haven't heard any big deals for PJ Washington either.
No, and restricted free agent, I'm not sure exactly how that's going to unfold, but it might even be, and I've seen that the Hornets are negotiating right now with PJ and Grant. I wonder if those players have actually, just are just focused on working a contract out with Charlotte. But yeah, you would think that other teams might want PJ Washington right now. You would think that other teams might be going after Grant Williams, and I'm sure they are. We just know, okay, it seems like the Hornets are that team that have been first and foremost going to get them. So we'll see what kind of money each of those guys make. And Grant Williams, with that being the only outside guy that they'd bring in, you would expect Kelly Oubre to not come back. I don't think nothing changes for Kelly Oubre, right? We haven't heard anything about that. I know Rod Boone expected that Kelly would leave in free agency. So we'll see how it all unfolds. But you're right, Dennis Smith Jr. gone. Miles is back. We know that now. And we still have to wait on PJ Washington and some other outside free agents at this point.
And as much as I love the qualifying offer for Teo Maledon, that may have meant that DSJ was Maledon. Once he saw Maledon get the qualifying offer, he's like, all right, well, I'm not going to compete with this guy. Or no desire, because I think he would have easily gotten over Maledon for the backup point guard spot. But I think he was like, all right, this franchise, I don't want to compete with that guy. This franchise obviously has other things in mind for the backup point guard position. But I still have questions because I don't think defensively Maledon is an answer. Like, I think that they've still got some issues in this backcourt in terms of defense. That there is a guy that I don't think Chicago is going to bring back, Ayo Dosunmu, who I think would be a good fit here. But I think the Hornets are preoccupied right now with looking at where they're going to land with PJ Washington and then giving Grant Williams the full MLE. I just don't know how realistic it is for them to bring in Dosunmu or anyone else. But we're going to see. But I think we're on the verge of a second straight offseason where this Hornets team is not necessarily interested in making many waves, and it hasn't worked out for them really in the past. But we'll have to see how it works out this season.
All right, that is a Doug Branson that needs a nap before he hits the road. Follow him on Twitter at Doug Branson LOH. I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods. Again, that includes YouTube. Make your second listen game to game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the league with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow them anywhere you get your podcast. All right, Doug, appreciate it. Appreciate everybody for making us your first listen. We'll be back with you tomorrow.
I'm going to Midnight Diner. Get some hash browns.